There's something we don't talk about enough, what it means to walk into a room and shift its energy without saying a word. When your aura is powerful, it's not because you're loud, flashy, or dramatic. It's because you carry truth, presence, and depth. And for many people, especially those who've built their lives around masks and shallow connections, that can feel threatening. Powerful energy isn't about ego. It's about alignment. When you're deeply rooted in who you are, when your yes means yes and your no means no, when you don't shrink to make others comfortable, you become a mirror. A mirror that reflects people's hidden insecurities, fears, and unresolved wounds. You walk into a room and without even opening your mouth, the energy shifts. People glance at you, some curious, some uneasy, some even a little guarded. You're not being arrogant, dramatic, or loud. You're simply present, fully, authentically. And in a world where so many are disconnected from who they really are, your grounded presence can feel like a confrontation. The truth is, when your energy is clear, strong, and self-assured, it acts like a mirror, not the kind that flatters or filters, but the kind that reveals. And not everyone is ready to look. Some people will feel exposed in your presence, not because you're judging them, but because being near you makes it harder for them to keep pretending. Your confidence can awaken their self-doubt. Your peace can highlight their anxiety. Your honesty can make their masks feel heavy. And here's what you need to understand. This has nothing to do with you being too much. It has everything to do with how little space most people give themselves to just be real. When someone hasn't faced their own wounds, they may subconsciously resent anyone who has. So don't internalize their discomfort. Don't start shrinking, softening your voice, or second-guessing your spirit to make others feel safe in their smallness. You're not here to dilute your presence just because someone else is afraid of their own reflection. You're here to be whole, fully expressed, fully awake, and the people who are ready, really ready, will feel that energy as a lighthouse, not a threat. You've stopped apologizing for protecting your peace. You no longer feel the need to justify why you don't answer every message immediately, why you don't say yes to every request, or why you choose your well-being over someone else's expectations. And while that may sound simple, it's revolutionary in a world that teaches people, especially the empathetic and self-aware, to confuse self-sacrifice with love. The moment you started setting boundaries without guilt, everything changed. You stopped over-explaining, you stopped managing other people's emotions, you stopped trading your exhaustion for their comfort. And some people didn't like that, not because you were being cruel, but because they were used to your compliance. When you set a boundary, you're saying, this is what I can give without betraying myself. It's not rejection, it's not punishment, it's self-respect. And for people who are used to gaining power through guilt, manipulation, or chaos, your clarity feels like resistance. But it's not resistance, it's freedom. Boundaries are not walls to keep others out. They're bridges that invite people to meet you with respect. But here's the truth, not everyone will walk that bridge. Some will pout, withdraw, or try to make you feel like you've done something wrong. That's when guilt used to creep in. That's when you used to backpedal. But now you stay rooted. You've learned that your worth isn't tied to how accessible, agreeable, or accommodating you are. You've stopped negotiating your values in exchange for temporary peace. You've realized that if someone only feels loved when you abandon yourself, that isn't love, it's control. Setting boundaries without guilt doesn't make you harsh, it makes you honest. It makes your love sustainable, and it means the people in your life get the real you. not the version of you that's quietly drowning under the weight of pleasing everyone else. You don't walk into a room seeking attention, and yet eyes find you. Not because you're trying to dominate the space, but because your energy is undeniable. You carry a quiet confidence, the kind that doesn't beg to be noticed, but naturally commands respect. And that kind of presence unsettles people who are still dependent on external validation to feel seen. You're not chasing applause, titles, or approval. You're not performing. You're simply living in your truth. And that alone makes you stand out. While others are exhausting themselves trying to impress, you're rooted in something deeper, authenticity. And that frequency is rare. There's a kind of magnetism that comes from being at peace with who you are. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not overcompensating. You've done the inner work, and it shows in your body language, in your silence, in your stillness. There's nothing frantic about you. That calm confidence makes people pause. It makes them feel. And not everyone is ready for that. Some will misread you, they'll assume you're aloof or intimidating simply because you're not seeking approval. But that says more about what they need than what you're giving. You're not cold, you're composed, you're not distant, you're discerning. You've learned that your energy is sacred, and you don't throw it around loosely just to be liked. And yet, without trying, you shine. Your energy speaks before you do. It announces your integrity. It reflects your clarity. It radiates a kind of strength that doesn't need an audience, only alignment. You don't need to be in the spotlight to have influence, because when you carry inner light, the room lights up with you. You're not numb, you're not detached. You feel everything, sometimes more than you'd like. You carry empathy like a second skin. You pick up on tension that hasn't been spoken and grief that hasn't been shared. But the difference is you don't let your emotions run the show, and you don't demand others carry the weight of what you're feeling. You've done the inner work. You sat with your pain long enough to know that it's not other people's job to rescue you from it. You've learned how to process instead of project. You reflect instead of react. And that makes you different in a world where so many are emotionally reactive, constantly looking for someone else to soothe their wounds or affirm their worth. Your emotional depth is not a weapon or a performance, it's wisdom. You allow yourself to feel, but you don't cling to those feelings for identity. You've developed the capacity to hold space for your own experiences without collapsing into them or needing someone else to validate that they matter. And this unsettles people, because many have been taught to use their emotions as currency to gain attention, guilt others, or secure attachment. When they can't provoke a reaction out of you, when you don't collapse into their chaos or cater to their emotional volatility, they might label you as cold or too self-contained. But in truth, you're just emotionally responsible. You know how to feel without flooding others. You know how to be vulnerable without being unstable. That is emotional maturity, not emotional distance. You don't chase validation because you've learned to validate yourself. You trust your intuition, you trust your process. You sat in the darkness long enough to recognize your own light, and now you no longer beg others to reflect it back to you. That's rare, that's powerful, and for many, that's intimidating. You've never been interested in surface level talk, the games, the gossip, the fake smiles. None of it sticks to you because you see through it. You're wired for depth. You feel when someone's words don't match their energy. You hear what's not being said. And while others may be fooled by charm or performance, you're tuned into something far more honest, the truth beneath the mask. People often feel exposed around you, and not because you're trying to pry into their lives, it's because your energy invites authenticity. It demands it, really. And that can be terrifying for those who've built their identities on who they think they're supposed to be instead of who they truly are. You don't shame people for their masks, you simply don't pretend not to notice them. You hold space, but you don't enable illusion. You ask the kind of questions that go beneath the armor. You speak from your soul, not your ego. And that shifts the energy in any space you enter. Suddenly the room is a little more honest, a little more uncomfortable, and if people are ready for it, a whole lot more free. This gift of seeing clearly can feel heavy at times. It's lonely being the one who notices what others ignore. You may feel like the outsider in spaces where performance is the norm. But understand this, your ability to see truth is not a flaw. It's a light in a world that desperately needs it. And here's the most powerful part. You don't use your discernment to control, shame, or expose others. You use it to connect. You see people not just as they are, but as they could be if they dropped the mask and came home to themselves. That's what makes your aura so powerful. It doesn't play along with a pretense. It calls people back to the truth they've been afraid to speak. And not everyone is ready for that kind of honesty, but the ones who are will never forget how safe they felt in your presence. You no longer bend to be liked. You don't dilute yourself to fit into rooms you've outgrown. You're not here to impress. You're here to align. And that inner alignment, your unwavering commitment to living with integrity makes you unshakable. You've stopped chasing crowds, trends, or temporary applause because you found something far more fulfilling, clarity of purpose. That doesn't mean you have all the answers or a perfect path. It means you've chosen to live by values, not validation. Every decision you make comes from a place of deep knowing, not people-pleasing, and that rattles people. Because we live in a culture obsessed with being liked, going viral, staying relevant. But you've chosen to be real instead of being liked. You've chosen depth over noise. You've chosen to root yourself in something solid while the world keeps spinning on shallow approval. Some people don't know how to engage with that kind of power. When they realize they can't manipulate you, flatter you, or guilt you into abandoning your truth, they'll call you difficult, rigid, or intense. But what they're really saying is, I can't control you and that makes me uncomfortable. You don't need to explain your boundaries. You don't need to chase understanding. You're not rude. You're just done shrinking. You've learned that staying true to yourself will cost you some connections, and that's okay. You'd rather walk alone in purpose than get lost in a crowd of people who don't really see you. You've built your self-worth on something internal, something sacred, and that makes your aura feel immovable. Others may not always understand it, but those who are seeking truth, depth, and courage will feel it, and they'll gravitate toward it, not because you're popular, but because your presence reminds them of what's real. That's what happens when you're rooted in purpose. You don't follow the crowd. You become the compass. You no longer chase being seen correctly by everyone. You've accepted that your truth will be too much for some, confusing to others, and threatening to those who benefit from distortion. And instead of exhausting yourself trying to explain, convince, or defend who you are, you let them misunderstand. Because your peace is worth more than their approval. It used to sting being misread, misquoted, or dismissed. You wanted to be known, to be understood. But over time, you realized that constantly managing other people's perceptions kept you small. It drained your energy and blurred your authenticity. So now you choose peace over proving. You choose truth over acceptance. You choose to stand in your light, even if it casts a shadow that others don't like. Being comfortable with being misunderstood doesn't mean you're closed off or indifferent. It means you've matured. You've realized that not everyone has the capacity or willingness to meet you at the level of your honesty, your clarity, or your depth. And that's okay. You no longer twist yourself into versions that feel palatable. You'd rather be real and misjudged than inauthentic and applauded. This level of detachment isn't cold, it's courageous. It means you've taken your power back from the opinions of others. It means your self-worth no longer hinges on how people interpret your silence, your boundaries, your standards, or your story. When your aura is powerful, it won't always be liked, but it will always be felt. And you've learned to be at peace with that, because at the end of the day, being misunderstood by the world is nothing compared to the cost of abandoning yourself. And you're done abandoning yourself. When your aura is powerful, it's not about dominance, it's about truth. And truth isn't always easy to carry. It will cost you comfort. It will make you outgrow certain people, certain rooms, and sometimes even parts of yourself. But it's worth it. Your energy speaks before you do. It reveals what's real. It disrupts what's fake, and it awakens what's asleep in others. That's why not everyone can hold it. That's why some will misunderstand, reject, or resist you. Not because you're wrong, but because you reflect what they haven't faced. Don't shrink. Don't soften yourself to fit into fragile spaces. The world doesn't need more watered down souls trying to be liked. It needs more people like you, rooted, whole, honest, and awake, people who carry their light unapologetically. Let your presence be a reminder that power isn't noise, it's clarity, it's self-trust, it's the audacity to walk in alignment, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You're not too much, you're not too intense, you're just powerful, and most people simply don't know how to hold that kind of truth.